Hello and welcome to this how-to video for Instant ID. In this video, I will be demonstrating how to configure the Customization Toolkit, an Instant ID feature which allows the addition of custom processes and actions that are outside of the default functionality of Instant ID. These custom processes and actions are achieved by using JavaScript files, which can be triggered by an event within Instant ID. There are many examples where a custom process may be used. Some examples would be changing a field from read-only, changing the value for that field, and then changing the field back to read-only when a new enrollment is started within Instant ID, or changing available values for text fields when a value for another field is selected, such as populating a list field with state or province names when a country is selected. Another example would be modifying data read from a smart card before that data is saved to a database. In order to use the Customization Toolkit, you must first have a developed JavaScript file which carries out the custom process you desire. For advice and examples regarding development of JavaScript files for use with the Instant ID Customization Toolkit, please refer to the Developer's Guide located in the following location once Instant ID is installed. If you do not have the expertise to develop the JavaScript file, please contact Entrust, who can quote for chargeable development support. Depending on the type of custom process you wish to implement and the way in which the JavaScript file has been developed, you may also use a lookup table containing values that will be used during the custom process by the JavaScript file. One of the custom process examples I demonstrate in this video uses a lookup table. In this first example, I have a workflow with two fields, first name and last name. I wish to convert the first character of the first name to uppercase and also uppercase the entire last name field. The first thing I need to do is configure a custom process configuration. To do this, click on the gear icon, Settings, Customization Toolkit, and Create. Give your configuration a name and then browse to your JavaScript file. Should your JavaScript file be edited after creating this configuration, you will need to come back to the configuration and re-import the JavaScript file in order for the new edits to take effect. If you wish, you can provide a description for the custom process configuration. You can then click the Test Configuration button. This test checks the content and syntax of the JavaScript file. It does not check that the JavaScript file carries out the custom process you desire. This is the responsibility of the individual who developed the JavaScript file. Once the test is successful, click Save to save your configuration. We now need to configure our workflow to use this custom process configuration. We open our workflow in Designer. We select the properties for the workflow and we click on Event Configuration and then click on Add to add a new event configuration. Firstly, we need to choose an event. The event is when the JavaScript file will be called during workflow enrollment. There are several events to choose from, each representing a different stage of enrollment. Depending on the events you choose, the next available choices for event configuration will change. For example, if I select Delete Credential as the event, I can then choose whether my JavaScript file will be called before deleting the credential or after. If I change the event to Transition, the next choice changes to Step, which are the workflow steps for this workflow. With the Transition event, your JavaScript file is called when you transition to the workflow step you select from this drop-down list. If I select when a field value changes as the event, the next selection changes again, this time to the list of available fields within the workflow. This event would be used if you wish to call your JavaScript file when a field within the workflow changes value. For further information regarding the event types, please refer to the built-in help section of Instant ID. For my example, I would like to call my JavaScript file when I transition to the Personalize workflow step. So I select Transition as the event type, and then I select Personalize as the step. Next, I select my custom process configuration, which I created earlier, and then I select the fields within the workflow that will be acted upon by the JavaScript file. In my example, the first name and last name fields. If my JavaScript file was developed to use a lookup table, I would need to create a data source for that table within Instant ID and then select the data source from the drop-down list. This example does not use a lookup table. If you wish to stop the custom process, should an error occur during the process, you can check the box Stop on Failure. Code can be added to JavaScript files to enable logging, allowing you to troubleshoot and establish the root cause of the failure. This would be the responsibility of the individual who develops the JavaScript file. Once complete, click OK and then save your changes. Now, if we return to the home screen, open our workflow and enter a first name and last name, when we transition to the Personalize step, the JavaScript file is uppercasing the first character of the first name and the entire last name. In my second example, I have a workflow with a list field called Location. I also have 4 text fields, which need to be populated with different data depending on the selection I make from the Location list field. To achieve this, I will be using a JavaScript file and also a lookup table. In the lookup table are the input values for the location list field and the output values for the 4 text fields. I begin by creating a custom process configuration, giving the configuration a name, browsing to my JavaScript file, testing the configuration, and save. Because my JavaScript file is using a lookup table, I need to create a data source for that table. Click on Create to create a new data source. Give the data source configuration a name. select your database type, in my example Microsoft Access, then enter the full path plus the database name. For more detailed information regarding data source configuration, please refer to the data source how-to video. Once your data source for your lookup table is configured, click on Test Connection, and if successful, click Save. Next, we need to configure the workflow to use the custom process configuration and lookup table data source that we have just configured. So in Workflow Designer, we select Properties, Event Configuration, and Add. For my example, I wish to call my JavaScript file when the location list field changes value. So for the event type, I select when a field value changes. And for the field name, I select the location list field. If I wanted to call my JavaScript file when a particular value in the list field is selected, I could choose that value from the field value drop-down list. I wish to call my JavaScript file for every value in the list field, so I will leave this blank. Next, select the custom process configuration we have just created. Then select the workflow fields that will be acted upon by the JavaScript file. In my example, the location list field and the 4 text fields. Next, select the data source configuration we have just created for the lookup table that is used by the JavaScript file. Then click OK and save your changes. If we return to the home screen and use our workflow, we can see that our JavaScript file and lookup table are changing the output values for the 4 text fields depending on the value selected for the location list field. For further information regarding the customization toolkit, please refer to the built-in help section of Instant ID. That completes this demonstration. Thank you for watching.